This is Brian Carlton for ABN Newswire. I'm back at the Bowlers Club of New South Wales for the September Symposium Resources Roadshow, where ASX-listed companies in the booming resources sector get an opportunity to present to potential investors in a fairly relaxed and informal but productive environment. Presenting today was Adelaide Resources Limited, ASX code ADN, a mineral exploration company focused on gold, copper and uranium, with interests in 25 exploration licences covering about 8,000, in fact more than 8,000 square kilometres across South Australia, the Northern Territory and Queensland. Its Managing Director, Chris Drown, joins me now. Chris, welcome to ABN Newswire.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's look at your Rover Gold Copper project first. It is your flagship, which is near Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory. Rover was dormant for quite a while.
The Rover field was first identified as having potential to have copper-gold deposits of the type which have been historically mined at Tennant Creek back in the late 50s or the early 60s by the Bureau of Mineral Resources, and then later on by a company called Pico, which was a very successful Australian explorer and miner. Now, it's an isolated area. There's no sort of cattle grazing, and in fact there wasn't much land use. And we had the advent in 1976 of the Aboriginal Land Rights Act.
Yes.
And that was, we think, was one of the critical things that sort of put the whole area into the freezer. That we're now working on freehold Aboriginal land, but at the time, you know, it was a new process to go through. Pico weren't prepared to do it at the time. So what it resulted in was the area having a 23-year period with no modern exploration. So we came back in 2005. That was the first serious exploration conducted at Rover in a 23-year period. And really what it meant for us was that we've got our hands on a fabulously prospective bit of the nation that's been left for over 2 decades.
Clearly you're working closely with the Indigenous landholders.
Well, we have to. We're there by, I guess, their invitation. We have a deed of exploration that governs our access and the way that we conduct ourselves. It also outlines the financial benefits that we will pay and do pay to those people, so it's a two-way street. We believe we have a very positive relationship with the TOs, the traditional owners, as do our the other competitor companies that are working in the district.
It did historically deliver some unbelievable grades of ore, didn't it?
Tennant Creek has a reputation for having delivered what we call company makers. They're not huge deposits in terms of tonnage, but their grade makes up for them. To name a couple, Juno produced at almost 2 ounces per tonne. That's almost unheard of in terms of a production grade. It basically just minted cash for Pico for a while. Not quite sure how well they spent all of it, but that was a wonderful deposit. White Devil produced at about 1/2 ounce of gold, and of course produced a wonderful cash flow that allowed that company to go out and grow itself very substantially as it did. And there's other success stories that have come out of the district as well.
What's the size of the Rover tenement there?
I think it's about 270 square kilometres. It's not a huge area. However, it does capture the bulk of what we currently understand to be the limit of the Rover field. Now, it may well be that it's bigger, more exploration may show it's bigger, but currently it looks like we've got the bulk of it. So although it's not thousands of square kilometres, it's a pretty damn good 270 square kilometres.
In the past year or so, you've been drilling like dentists. What have you found?
That's a good analogy we have. We've got 2 rigs working up there as we speak at the moment. We've been thrilled with the results that we've got. We went up there last year with a pretty modest budget of about $750,000. Towards the end of that, we started to see some success, and my board was able to increase that budget by another $500,000. And then we really hit our straps, and in fact we've now we raised $5.2 million late last year, which has all been dedicated to that project, and I think we're about $3 million of the way through that now. So and it's all going on drilling. You know, it's drilling and the assaying and logging and those sort of costs. It's a very drill-dominated thing. The results we've been seeing are some fabulous grades of particularly copper, but also gold. At 2 prospects, one Rover 1, which we share with a company called West Gold Resources, and another one about 2 kilometres north that we own 100% called Rover 4. They're both looking very positive for us. and we're sort of seeing some of the better copper intersections that are being achieved in the nation are being achieved out at Rover.
I know you're playing it down a little bit at this stage, but Rover 12 is looking particularly good.
Rover 12 is a fascinating prospect. It's geophysically, it looks to be about the size of Rover 1. Now, we know Rover 1 from the work that our neighbours have done has got a million gold equivalent ounces of resource in it, and they're growing that. The geophysical footprint or fingerprint, I guess, or signal from Rover 1 is about the same size as this Rover 12.
Wow.
What we think is interesting is we look at the history of Rover 1. It had about over 30 drill holes in it by the time that Westgold got into it and really started to work out where within it to be looking for the high-grade gold and copper. Rover 12 has got 7 holes in it.
Okay.
It's hardly been touched compared to Rover 1, and we believe there's every chance that there'll be prizes lurking within that.
So you'd be tipping it'll have a bunch more holes in the not too distant future?
Well, we certainly want to put some more in. That said, if we're drilling there, we can't drill at the things which are also very good targets, Rover 1 and Rover 4, but we are keen to do some more at Rover 12.
So it's a surplus of potential at the moment?
Look, we could probably point to 20 targets that we'd like to be drilling. We can't afford to do them all, so we try and prioritise them. Rover 1's delivering economic intersections, Rover 4's delivering probably economic intersections, but we think Rover 12 is probably the next best thing.
Sounds like an interesting future ahead. Now, Moonta project, just northwest of Adelaide. What's happening there?
It's in an area called the Copper Triangle. It's the historic Moonta, Kadina, Wallaroo area. It was a very important district for the state of South Australia's economy. Early on, it was the scene of copper mining by largely Cornish people who came out from Cornwall. And it's importantly, I guess, geologically, it sits on the eastern margin of a geological province we call the Gawler Craton. And to the north, that same sort of belt of prospective rocks hosts the Olympic Dam deposit, which of course is a super world-class deposit. To the northwest, we have Prominent Hill, which is being very successfully exploited now by Oz Minerals. And then moving back down the other way to the south of us, we have Rex Minerals with a prospect called Hillside, which is probably 40 or 50 kilometres to the south. So it's forming, it's a patch of highly copper-gold prospective country. We got sort of cracking there early in the year. It's the sort of the barley belt of Australia. So the next time you raise a beer, the malt was probably grown on the York Peninsula, and we do have to work around the cereal cropping cycle. But at the start of the year, we did a soil geochemical program which highlighted a number of targets. We drilled some of those before the crops got too advanced, and we're very, very encouraged with the results we got of the prospect called Willamulka. In fact, the very last hole that we drilled in that program, the very last 9 metres of the very last hole hit 9 metres at over 2% copper.
Wow.
Which is a fabulous result, and some significant gold as well there. We're very excited about it. In fact, we've been thrilled with what we've been able to achieve in this one sort of period of work. We're very keen to get back out there, which we look doing late in the year, or more likely very early next year.
Okay.
And obviously we'll be out there drilling a lot more holes into that prospect.
Let's talk uranium for a minute. You've got some great first drilling results through there, but the uranium price isn't real flash at the moment. To what extent does market price affect your focus and priorities?
Look, with uranium, to be perfectly honest, we see it as a very long-term play. It is currently, I think, sitting, the spot's probably about 45 a pound US, something like that. It's not something that plays on our mind. We're probably looking at a decade from discovery through to development. We believe the commodity does have a bright future. South Australia is a good place to look for it because it's a friendly jurisdiction. But we've been thrilled with some early results that we've had with a joint venture with a company called Quasar Resources. That they're not listed. However, they will be known to some investors as the company that Alliance is in joint venture with over the 4 Mile prospect. 4 Mile is a wonderful uranium discovery that joint venture made in the eastern part of South Australia. We're working on the Northern Eyre Peninsula in a different area, but looking for a similar style of deposit. And Quasar managed that joint venture. They went out late last year into an area that had never been explored for uranium before, and they got all the right geological indicators, and most importantly, they got strongly anomalous uranium. They're currently out there with another rig following that up. And so that's a sort of probably not playing much of a role in investors' minds with Adelaide Resources, but it's a very nice third string to have to the bow.
Gold and copper are both on the up, though. You'd have to be pleased with that.
Well, gold's sitting at a record price. I guess it's dampened a little bit by such a strong Aussie at the moment. I think the Aussie's over 96 the last time I looked. But certainly we see gold having a very, very bright future. Copper is a metal that simply builds economies. Asia will consume enormous amounts of copper going forward as their economies modernise. Both of those metals look fabulous, and I guess our strategy is to spend the money that we raise from shareholders on our copper gold hunts, and to try and do the uranium through joint venture funding, which is the current situation. Both copper and gold we think have got fabulous futures, and they're very well matched to a company our size, and in fact at both Rover and on the York Peninsula they naturally occur together geologically.
Let's look at the company just for a second. Your share price has been whacked around a bit, consistent with all the usual factors for the resources sector off the back of the GFC. You're in a good position though, $6 million in the bank to fund your further exploration, as you mentioned. Are you convinced that there's still some room to move in terms of your share price? The company's undervalued.
Look, it's way undervalued by any measure. One of the things that we do, I suppose, is compare ourselves to some of our peer group companies, some of those that are active in the same districts that we're in. And I think if we use those as a yardstick, you would come to the conclusion that Adelaide is way undervalued. As I said, some of the results that we've been achieving they're not just good exploration results; they're some of the best that the nation will see.
Because the grades are exceptionally high.
That's right. I mean, I did a bit of a run through copper intersections late last year just to see how we stood up against our peers nationally. Mm-hmm. And Sandfire had some great hits, Rex had some great hits down at Hillside, and Caduco had some great hits at Rocklands. But after that, we were talking about sort of the results that we've been publishing and releasing from Tennant Creek. They are substantially good grade intersections, eminently economic type of grades that we're talking about.
Just in summary, what was the thrust of your pitch tonight to potential investors? What was the hook you were hoping to cause them to have a closer look at you?
I think it is that the story is a very sound one. We're very focused. The projects we have are fabulous. They're delivering fabulous exploration results. And as I said, by any measure, we are woefully undervalued in the marketplace. Now, I know every managing director would always say that their company's undervalued, but I think, as I said, by any objective measure, Adelaide is demonstrably so. So, we believe that the future is very bright for us. There's other things I think that are also possible in the future. The way that the whole of the Rover story plays out, we're one of a number of companies that are active up there. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens there in the future. But you cannot divorce us from whatever is going to happen up in that district.
But you're obviously confident it's all upside from here.
We think it's all upside for Adelaide Resources, absolutely. Yeah.
Chris Drown, Managing Director, Adelaide Resources, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Brian.
This is Brian Carlton for ABN Newswire.